right, we have another environmental dimension, which is the social structures and institutions. On the Sakai page, I've given a little kind of introduction explaining that there's a little slight difference to like what social structures are and what social institutions are, and we'll flesh it out slightly more in this video. And sometimes I acknowledge that social structures and institutions can be confused with formal organizations, but if we just kind of think about social structures and institutions as kind of this like umbrella categories, with formal organizations being the specific agencies that kind of like play out the functions of the social structures and institutions, I think that kind of helps delineate the two. So kind of introducing the concept of like social structures and institutions, there's this kind of fictional scenario I kind of imagined that you and 100 people have made a space journey to a new planet that has recently, thanks to technology, become inhabited by humans. So how will you work together to be successful in this endeavor? What will you need to ensure your survival? So a situation like this would call for these 101 people to come up with some sort of structure to formulate society. And so that's really what the goal of social structures and institutions are, is taking chaos and putting some order to it in order for there not to be anarchy and for the society's individuals' needs to be met. This is actually kind of based off a TV show called The 100 that's like apocalyptic, and my husband loves it, and I get frightened thinking if that really happened. So there's that. All right, so some key terms to remember within social structures and institutions. I threw this one out on the Sakai as well, kind of defining what exactly the social structure is. I'm not going to read through it because you can read it on Sakai, but it's really, social structures is another name for society. So it's that collective unit that has a commonality. It's kind of put in place to help ensure the survival and well-being of people. And so this, having a social structure, acknowledges that social life is just not this random chaotic blah whatever going on in life, but it has pattern, it has structure, it has some sort of boundaries put in place in order to promote the good of society. So in contrast, social institutions are those specific ways that you solve the problems that are present in a particular society. So in order to promote the stability, institutions are put into place to organize rights and duties into specific roles and statuses, and then formal organizations and kind of come out of those institutions that are put into place. An institution would be like healthcare, and then formal organizations would be like Spectrum Health, Mercy Health, those specific places that carry out the functionality. So within society, or informal or social structures and institutions, you have the term called statuses. So this one is maybe kind of familiar because you think about social status, like where do you rank on the food chain? Are you popular, not popular? That's kind of like the middle school, high school, maybe even college and into your life kind of way to look at statuses. But it's really it's a specific social position. And so when people are assigned these roles in society, they have behaviors and expectations attached. So if you were given the position of a member of the law enforcement, you are expected to behave in a way that's just and fair to all. So you can see this play out in effect very much in real time with the shooting with Patrick Loyola in Grand Rapids. A member of law enforcement acted in a way that many people believed was not consistent with the status and the role expectation. Other people believed he did. And so there was a lot of tension within it, which is kind of an example of how societies can be flawed, even though we might have some structure. People's interpretations and beliefs around those expectations can differ based on kind of their position in society, if they are discriminated against, or if they have or if they're in a oppressed position, or if someone's in a position of privilege. There might be different perceptions on how these different statuses should play out. Social class is one that's also a key term. So it's the contemporary structures of inequality. So you're thinking really, if you think in the basic terms, it's like upper class, middle class, lower class. It's kind of this organization and understanding about how social order is structured for better or for worse. There's different theses, different positions, I'm going to say that. Different positions on the idea of social class, because there can be some controversy. And a more conservative thesis is that inequality is natural. We are not all equal coming into life, and so no change should be made to alter it and to empower individuals who are in a different class than others. And they just say this is the natural order of events, and this is how society is intended to be. A more radical thesis is that equality is the natural order and that inequality is the abuse of power. And so those theses or mindsets can really influence how individuals might vote or what political party they may align with, because their viewpoint is either more conservative or radical. All right, so there are 8 different key social institutions that we explore in this dimension. And so there's the government and political institution, economic, educational, the healthcare institution, social welfare, religion, mass media, and family and kinship as an institution. And so this can get this one might get not blurry, but we also identify family as a different dimension. But as we go through the slides and kind of define what these are, you'll kind of see how the concept of family does provide some structure within society, because it's intended to be the institution where people kind of learn their culture and are, you'll see when we get to it. All right. So in order to kind of understand these different institutions, we're going to define them and explain some current trends in the U.S. that are present within the social institutions. And so I based these largely out of what was in the textbook. The textbook was written right on the cusp of COVID and kind of while that was going on. So there's going to be some things that probably have changed a little bit, and I'm going to kind of like walk through those, and not necessarily as evidence-based because they're kind of the current reality, but it'll help kind of help us understand how significant events can really alter different dimensions and then prompt different behaviors. All right, so when we're going over these trends, we need to look at them in the context of a global viewpoint. Because of globalization, we live in a very global world. But it also helps illuminate how the U.S. differs from other societies, and especially other societies that are kind of categorized at the same developmental level as the United States. And so it's really good. I think that's one of the positives of globalization, is that we're able to look at other societies that are similar through a critical lens and be like, hey, they're doing something different. Is that actually more impactful? Or is what the United States doing actually beneficial in looking at the pros and cons of each? And it also can just prompt us to ask, well, why are we doing it? Are we doing it because we always done it? Are we doing it to exert some sort of power and control? Are we trying to impose Western values and culture on different societies? It's just something that helps increase our awareness. And we just have to really acknowledge that the world continues to have high social inequality, and is globalization impacting this for better or for worse. So tuck those in the back of your mind. All right, first institution that we are going to talk about is the government and politics. So government and politics is responsible for making and enforcing those societal rules, resolving the internal and external conflicts. So you can kind of think about that as the judicial system with our courts, and mobilizing collective resources to meet societal goals. And so that can be kind of that policy piece of it all, that you're mobilizing or you're promoting a certain thing in order to meet needs. So that's kind of the functionality of government and politics. So this trend, the colonialism to neocolonialism, is kind of a historic one. So if you think about colonialism, and this might have to go rack your brain back to high school history classes, it was really where these core group of developed countries went into different countries with less development and kind of decided to take them over and colonize them. So that their intent was to make them essentially like mini versions of their own country. And so you saw this present specifically in a lot of African countries. I think about Liberia, and the capital is called Monrovia, named after President Monroe. And so it's like specifically taking these colonies these countries and these peoples and making them into these mini colonies for the different countries. The United States did this, Britain did this, Japan. There's a couple other ones that I can't recall off the top of my head. And so the intent was to then kind of exert dominance and power in these different countries that were rather vulnerable just due to their lack of structure and development. So after World War II, there was a push against colonialism because it's kind of a little bit racist. Well, it's pretty racist. And it's not very celebratory of culture and difference and self-determination because it was just really an effort of domination. So they pulled back, but then it left some of these developing countries that previously had imposed structure structureless because now there was no governance by these more developed countries. And so it kind of has like led to some civil wars, a lot of instability. And since there has been some repairs and some progress and development structures put into place to promote more independence of these countries, and so that kind of transitions to that neo-colonialism. That's kind of like this post-colonialism world that we live in. And so like, how does Western influence still kind of impact that? Because we do have great influence as a developing country, and we kind of hold this power of, especially like with media, and it can be looked at as kind of still kind of having some of those oppressive kind of like just coming in and taking over vibes. But we've moved away from the concept of colonialism, but now what does that look like for countries who don't have those structures, and how is some of the developed countries still imposing their viewpoints onto them? So that's kind of this historical global picture. But if we're thinking about concerns specific to the United States, I don't even probably have to put this first one. Everybody knows this. We have a very sharply divided electorate. I mean, I'm recording this on November 9th, the day after midterm elections. And I mean, if you'd have to be having your head in a hole if you hadn't heard some of the division over different candidates, over different proposals over the past few months. And so the trend in government and politics isn't necessarily that it's like two parties fighting to be the best candidate. People are very passionate, and it's very polarizing, and it sometimes almost have blinders to what the real issues are that are being debated because they're so passionate about their own political party or fear-mongering against the other party. So that's a very growing trend in the United States, and I think COVID even escalated that because it brought into the arena, like if you think about Michigan specifically and you think about Governor Whitmer, some of her policies that were in place during COVID around nursing homes, that tends to be one that gets brought up a lot. One party will say that Whitmer killed your grandma. I literally saw that on a billboard or on a restaurant sign the other day, and it kind of caught me off guard. But on the other hand, you have other parties saying that she acted within her power in the best interest of individuals. And so, we have the opportunity to vote for a candidate, and it just gets real messy. So I'm glad that the election day is over. Regardless of how I feel about the results, I'm just glad that it's done. The role of money in the political process, kind of what does that look like when you have people of wealth and position putting money into their candidates and getting their voices out there? What happens to individuals who don't have the funds to maybe promote their candidate? Is everybody's equal voices being heard? Voter turnout has been a cause for concern. Also, like talking about the legitimacy of election results. That was a huge one at the last presidential candidate. It's a conversation that continues to be brought up about voter fraud, having ballots being given from people who have passed away. Do felons have the right to vote? Do you need your ID to vote? And then having those measures in place, does that discriminate those who have limited resources? So I would say trends in government and politics can be summarized very efficiently as a dumpster fire right now.